Welcome to Dan's Talks. My guest today on this podcast is with Lance Gumbs, who is the Vice President for the Northeast region of the National Congress of American Indians and a Shinnecock Indian born and raised on the reservation in Southampton, and I guess a long-time friend of mine. And we're here to discuss among other things, the first landing of the settlers way back when, and we'll get to that. But first, I wanted to mention something that he's just told me about, which is that on Tuesday, he was at the White House. Can you describe what that was all about?
Oh, how you doing, Dan? It's nice to be on Dan Talks. Appreciate you having me on. Tuesday, I got an invite from the White House for Dr. Jill Biden, and it's the first Native American Heritage Month celebration that the White House has ever held under any presidency. So it was really nice. We had tribal leaders from all over the country that were in attendance for this inaugural event, and they have promised to, in this administration anyway, to continue to acknowledge Native American Heritage Month. And, we're all hoping, as tribal leaders across the country, that they will continue this, through future administrations. But it was a really nice event. Dr. Jill Biden came out and spoke to all of us. And then they had Deb Hyland there, who's the first Native American Secretary of the Interior Department, and they also had Chief Lynn Malerba there. She is from the Mohegan tribe right up here in Connecticut, and if people don't know, they will know her soon because her name will be on all of the money printed in the United States here moving forward, as she has been appointed the first Native American Treasurer of the United States. So her money will be coming. Her name will be on the money coming out sometime in December here. So it's been some exciting times in terms of Indian country as a whole and the achievements that we are making.
What do we know about the first landing? There's a big boulder up in Conscience Point in the North Sea where the settlers came from Lynn, Massachusetts in a sailboat and came ashore in June of 1640, and they were met by the Shinnecock Indians. What happened?
Well, they were met by a group of Shinnecock people. This wasn't the first time that we had seen people that didn't look like us, so to speak. But this was the first time where they actually landed on shore down at Conscious Point. From there, our people welcomed them in. I don't know how great that is in modern times now, but we welcomed the first immigrants to this land here, and we helped them out. We eventually ended up giving them 8 square miles of land, which is now the village of Southampton. But during that time period, they didn't know much about surviving on the land, and so we helped them, and showed them how to have shelter for the winter, and provided them with the essentials. Taught them how to grow what we call the 3 sisters: the bean, the corn, and the squash. And it was a new beginning for all of us. If you want to look at it like that, it was a new beginning for us as tribal people. And it was a new beginning for them coming down from Lynn, Massachusetts. As you said, they had left Lynn, Massachusetts to escape religious persecution, and had come here to look for a new beginning. And I think that we all found new beginnings from that point on.
This time of year is celebrated for the one of the first dinners that was held, which is Thanksgiving dinner, in friendship with the particularly in New England, I think was how things played out for that. And then things didn't go too well after that, as we all know. And I think you could describe, a little bit of how the Indians did become so isolated and brought to where they were simply on reservations. How'd that come about?
Well, I think it was a clash of cultures. You had the whole notion started with the manifest destiny and the doctrine of discovery, which came out of Rome, and basically it said that if you were not a Christian or had Christian beliefs, then you could have your land taken and you could be enslaved and taught the Christian values. And the doctrine of discovery most recently has come up with the boarding school issues all across the country where our children were taken and put in these boarding schools. And the premise of that was to kill the Indian to save the man. And that has been not just here in the United States, though, that's been a worldwide doctrine out of the Catholic Church. And from that manifestation, we didn't have the concept of owning land. Our concept as indigenous people of this land here was shared land. So we didn't quite understand this notion of fencing in land, having these borders, and it was a different way that was brought to us, and that's where the clash of cultures started. When you talk about this dinner that happened, the dinner didn't happen. Actually, the Thanksgiving holiday is actually a recent holiday that was done, but there was a sharing with the Wampanoag people up on Cape Cod. There was no turkey. There were some of these things that have been said, are just not true, and history, has made it out to seem like there was this wonderful time and there was sharing. No, there was a sharing, and again, it was very similar to what happened here with us in Conscious Point, where we showed them how to survive through the winter and how to grow these vegetables and to live off the water. Most of us coastal tribes, we're what's called first contact tribes. And most of the first contact tribes from New England down here to Long Island and down into Virginia all had the same types of interactions. And it was, our lack of understanding of the European model of land ownership.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what caused the majority of the conflicts that transpired throughout the coming years after first contact. There was just a lack of understanding of us owning land. It was wide open. It was free. You take what you want. You live on it for a while. And here, like in our area here, up in especially our sacred Shinnecock Hills, which we've been fighting since the beginning of first contact to maintain. We had settlements and encampments all through the Shinnecock Hills here, all up through the National Golf Course, the Shinnecock Hills Golf Course, where the college is located. We had these encampments, and you moved around, and it was a different lifestyle, and that's what happened. It was a clash of lifestyles that led to the Indian Wars and the conflicts. And eventually our people being put onto these reservations, and In the beginning, it was good. It was just us meeting a new group of people, but it was a different way of life, and it led to the outcome that we have today, with us fighting to maintain our identity, our traditions, our culture, our history, and to maintaining our land bases.
Well, legally at this point, the Indian tribes are considered to be separate nations from the United States, but you are sort of dual citizenships. You're certainly a citizen of the United States, and and this created a lot of problems, which also became opportunity in more recent times, I think. And there have been some developments within the last 20 years, 30 years, well, many of which you were very much in the forefront of. And I wanted to ask you to describe things that happened since you were young, and I recall you moving a lot of activities from being very secretive on the reservation to out front and combative, that resulted in many advances. What were some of them?
Well, I think we were trying to protect ourselves. When you mentioned the part about being secretive, it was more of a protection mode, trying to keep our culture and our traditions alive, and that resulted in us being very skeptical of what we call the outside world. Internally here, we had our community, and we have everything in our community that a regular government has. When you talk about the government to government relations, we have our health clinic, our dental clinic, we have our daycare center, we have our seniors program, we have our after school education programs. I mean, we have all of these programs here that we've maintained, throughout the time, but it was all internal. And I guess you would say, the younger generation, when we started looking at the opportunities out there, one of them was looking at the fact that we were not a federally recognized tribe; we were a state recognized tribe. And so we didn't have the financial benefits of federal recognition that federal recognition brings. And we had started that back in 1978.
Yeah,
when we found out we had gone for a land claim for lands around us here in the early 70s. And there were tribes up in Maine who were reacquiring lands, and we looked at that, and we knew that this 3,900 acres here from the canal all the way down here to the village line at Tuckahoe Road had been stolen from us illegally in 1859 to build a railroad out here from the city, and it was in violation of the Non-Intercourse Act. And so we decided that we were going to try to get some of this land back that had not been developed yet. And when we went to do that, we were told by the federal government that we were not on any recognized list. Now, we had been up to the 50s, but as we all know, the 50s was the termination era, where they had started to terminate tribes through acts of Congress. However, Shinnecock had never been terminated by an act of Congress, so we had just somehow disappeared off the Fed's list. So in 1978,
when did the recognition from the federal government take place? I remember it with you. I think I was with you when we learned about it.
Well, that's what happened. From 1978, a process that was supposed to take 2 years, so we should have technically been recognized in 1980, 81. That process took us 32 years, which is unheard of.
But
a federal government process, and we were federally recognized or acknowledged. I don't like to say recognized. We were federally acknowledged once again on October 1st in 2010. But that was a 32-year process, literally, that according to the regs, the rules and regs of the federal government should have taken 2 years. But what that has afforded us is to now have the weight of the federal government behind us, and it also gives us access to the trust responsibility that the federal government has to all of the 574 federally recognized tribes now that are in existence. And what that means is that we have access now to the program dollars that have been allocated for tribes under this trust responsibility. You know, a lot of people think that we just get things for free and we go to college for free. I heard that all my life. Oh, you guys go to college for free, you get this for free. That's not true. That's one of those false notions that has been put out there. We don't get anything for free. What the trust responsibility is just the repatriations for the millions and millions and millions of acres that the federal government stole from us throughout, from first contact to now.
Well, you told me the other day that there's thinking in the wind of changing the relationship between the tribes as a group and the federal government, and that this may not be a good idea, or it may be a good idea. I don't know whether how it may happen, or if it
yeah, that's this case that's before the Supreme Court right now, the ICWA case, which is the Indian Child Welfare Act, and that actually that came out of the boarding school era that I talked about earlier, where they were taking our children and putting them in these boarding schools. And Congress finally saw that was stripping our communities of our children. And, you know, if you do that for a certain amount of time where our children don't have the identity, don't know who they are, then there's no more Indian communities. And so Congress enacted this over 40 plus years ago to protect Indian children from being taken off of communities. There's a case called the Brackeen case, and it is right now before the Supreme Court. There was a big protest last week, but that case has the ability to flip Indian law on its head, because right now they're making the claim that we are race-based people versus political. The Constitution of the United States has us written into the Constitution. It says that Congress has plenary power over foreign governments, states, and Indian tribes. So we are governments within the state of New York, within the federal government. We are separate and equal governments to these states under the eyes of the federal government. And what this case could potentially do, if Congress not Congress, if the Supreme Court rules that we're race-based, it changes the whole dynamics from a political structure to now being a race-based. But there's no other race of people in the United States right now, Black, Chinese, Jewish, anyone, that is written into the Constitution except the American Indian, Native Americans. We're the only ones. So we're not a race-based group. We are a political group. And this court case will ultimately have some real effects on everything that we do, from land acquisition to funding to everything, if they rule that now all of a sudden after 400 plus years, now we're a race-based group. So it's a case that we're all watching all across the Indian country that may have great ramifications moving forward.
Thank you for being the guest on the podcast today, and I wish you the best. And I'll see you soon, I hope. And
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Yes, we just celebrated our Nunaway celebration Thursday night, which is our Thanksgiving, and you missed it. You usually are there, but we didn't have it in person again this year.
Oh,
So you will be invited again. You've always come, and we've always appreciated having you there. So thank you for having me on your show, and we'll talk soon.
sure. Bye-bye.